Hello everyone. So in today's lecture we will see about some further topics from mathematical background which will be needed in this course. We will see this now. So this is mainly from the calculus and analysis viewpoint. So suppose a and b are real number, then the closed interval AB, which is denoted by a square matrix a and b comma, is a set of real number such that a is less than or equals to x and x is less than or equals to b. Then the set a less than x and x less than b is called open interval. And here is some example for closed interval -3, 2. So it can be solved real number within the range of -3 to 2 and inclusive -3 and 2. Here is example of open interval which contain all the elements in the range from 1 to infinity, where 1 and infinity are not included. So now we define a norm ball. So a norm ball of radius r greater than 0 and center x0, where x0 is a point in Rn, is a set of points which are at a distance at most r from x0. So this norm defines the distance. So we collect all those points which are at a distance at most r from x0. We will denote it by closed ball because we are taking the point on the boundary also, which we will denote it by open square bracket x0 comma r close the bracket. Similarly, we define open ball where we can consider all the points whose distance from x0 is less than r. So I have shown here a ball of a center origin. So it contains all the points on the boundary as well as interior. So this is the example of closed ball and norm define the distance. Now let us define what is called interior point. So let x be the any point in set S. So it is called interior point of S if there exists some r greater than 0 such that closed ball of r around x is contained in S. So if there exists one r such that this closed ball lies in the set of S, then x is said to be interior point. Then x is said to be interior point. Now the set of all such points which are interior to S is called interior of S, and it is denoted by int S. Now if you look at this open ball center at origin and radius r, now the boundary is shown here by a dotted line. Now the interior point r are the points which are inside the boundary. So interior point of this side is shown by a shaded region or a colored region here. Now the set is said to be open set if this set is same as the interior of the set. So this open ball is open set. Another example of open set is say union interval from 1 to 2 and 3 to 4. So this is open set. So one can also define closed set. A set S in Rn is said to be closed if its complement in Rn is open. So complement of Rn is all those elements in Rn which are not in the set S. So this union of those closed interval is also a closed set. A closed interval is closed subset of R. Now we will define closure of S. So closure of S set is defined in such a way that X is a point defined in Rn and S is subset of Rn, then X belongs to closure of S. We will denote it by CLS if for every point epsilon is greater than 0, the intersection of S with closed ball of radius R around X is not empty. The set is closed if and only if S is equals to closure of S. So if you take this example, then the closure of set is union of two closed interval and interior of S. Set is union of two open intervals. Now set is open if its interior of that set is equals to S, and it is closed if closure of S is S. Remember that we are working with a set of real number, subset of real number, so most of these results are easy to find. Now the boundary of set S is defined as closure S minus interior of S. So if we take the last example, which was S equals to 1, 2, union 3, 4. So the closure is closed interval of two closed interval and interior is open interval. So closure of S minus interior of S will consist of 4 point 1, 2, 3, 4. So other will form the boundary of set S. Now a set is said to be bounded of it if it can be put in a ball of finite non-zero radius. So there is an example of bounded set. So this set can be put in a ball of finite radius. On the other hand, this interval is not bounded set, so it cannot be put in a ball of finite set. Then in Rn we need one important concept, that is called compact of a set. So a set S in Rn is said to be compact if it is closed and bounded. So here is an example of compact set where we have closed set. Also it can be put in a ball of radius, finite radius. We move on to the definition of sequence. So let set S is a subset of Rn and X can be a sequence of point to the set S. So the sequence xk converges to x star if for any given epsilon greater than 0 there exists a positive number k such that the distance between xk minus x star is less than or equals to epsilon for all the elements of the sequence index whose index is greater than k. So the sequence, we will see that the point of in the sequence are very close to x star. They are at the distance of most epsilon. So we can write xk tends to x star, or limit of k tends to infinity, xk is equals to x star. And a sequence is called Cauchy sequence if for any given epsilon there is a positive integer k. So if you take any 2 points of that sequence beyond k, then the distance between them is at most epsilon. So we have a sequence which is given here. So we will see that this sequence will converge to 1, 0. On the other hand, if you take a sequence which contain points -1, -1, so it do not converge to a point. Now we will look at the definition of continuous function. So let S is subset of Rn and function defined S to R from S to R is said to be continuous at x bar if given any epsilon is greater than 0, there exists a delta such that x belongs to S. Then the distance of x from x bar is less than delta implies that the function value as the difference in the function value at those 2 points is at most epsilon. So for any epsilon there exists some delta who shows that the distance between x minus x bar is less than delta. It implies that the difference between function value is at most epsilon. Now we say that function f is said to be continuous on A if it is continuous at each point of A. When we say that f is continuous, we means that it is continuous on the entire domain. And let C subscript, C denotes the class of all continuous function. Now here is the example of continuous function. So you will see that if you take any epsilon greater than 0, given any epsilon greater than 0, there exists some delta which is greater than 0, such that if you take any 2 points in the domain of x and x bar, then the distance between them is all at most delta. That implies that the distance between functions will be at most epsilon. So if you take any point x bar, then the distance between x and x bar, if it is less than delta, that implies that the function value at the different point, the difference between function value is at most epsilon. Now here is the definition. Here is an example of non-continuous function. So you will see that a function which is not continuous has these break. You can verify that the definition of continuity do not holds here. So now we will look at another important concept, which is key concept. It will be used quite often in our course, and it is called gradient. So suppose that we have a continuous function from Rn to R that is said to be continuously differentiable at x if the partial of function f at with respect to individual x exist and it is continuous. So let us denote the class of function whose first partial are continuous by script c1, and it is assumed that f belongs to c1. Then we define gradient of f at x to be a vector. So we will denote the gradient of x, which is same as gradient of fx. So you take a partial differential of f with respect to x1, x2 and so on, that is gradient is a column vector. Now here is the interpretation of gradient. So we have this function fx passing through this x dash. So the equation of this function is fx equals to fx dash, and this is the contour of this function fx. Now at x dash we will draw a tangent line. So this tangent line at x dash can be thought of as an approximation of function linear, a fine approximation of function at x dash. Now we take a perpendicular to this tangent. Now on one side of this tangent, fx is greater than fx dash. On the another side, fx is less than fx dash. So you will see that there is a gradient always pointing towards the direction where function value increases, and negative of gradient pointing in the direction where the function value decreases. So this concept will be useful when we talk about minimum of function. Now here is a function which is continuous, but it is not differentiable at x naught, while we can see that this function is continuous at every point other than except at x naught. And here is the example of function which is continuous as well as differentiable. We will also need the concept of differential derivative. So let S be a subset of R, and we have open set, and f will be a function from S to R that is continuously differentiable. Then for any x and any non-zero d, the directional derivative of f in the direction of d is given by partial of function f with respect to d validated at x. So this is nothing but limit has epsilon tends to 0, fx plus epsilon d minus fx by epsilon. So you make a small movement of epsilon along the direction of d from x. In the limit has a epsilon tends to 0. How does this behave? So this is called directional derivative of f at x along the direction of d. So this is equals to gradient of x transpose d, and it is easy to see that suppose that if you define a new function phi from r to r, which is parameterized using d phi, is nothing else fx plus td, then delta f by delta d at alpha is equals to 0 will give you a gradient of x transpose d, and that is directional derivative of fx along the direction of d. We now move to the second order derivative. So the function which is continuously differentiable is said to be twice continuously differentiable if the second derivative exists with respect to each pair of xi and yi. So let C2 denotes the class of twice continuously differentiable functions, and let f belongs to C2. Then we define Hazen of fx at x to a matrix containing all the secondary vectors. So you will see that again this is n by n matrix, and you will also see that it is a symmetric matrix. So this is important thing. That is why we studied some of the property of Hazen symmetric matrix when we revised a linear algebra background. Now similar to first directional derivative, one can have second directional derivative. That derivative is d transpose Bragg square fxd. So here are some example. So we have seen Rosenbrock function in earlier lectures. So that function is like this. So its gradient for any point x1 and x2 turn out to be this, and the Hazen turn out to be this matrix, and you will see that Hazen is symmetric matrix. That is very important. Now let us look at another example, which is fx1 x2 is x1 epsilon to the power minus x1 square minus x2 square. So here are the gradient and Hazen, a gradient vector and Hazen of this function evaluated at any arbitrary x1 and x2. So we will now need a concept of Taylor series. So suppose that we consider a class of function for which the derivative of any order is continuous. So let us have a function f from R to R. It belongs to C infinity. Then we can write Taylor series for f around x naught in this form. So it is infinite series. Now suppose that we decided to use only f dash x naught. Then the function value, the function f of x at x naught, can be function using only first two terms. So we do not use the remaining terms. Similarly, quadratic approximation of fx naught can be written like this by ignoring the remaining terms. Now we will see what the truncate Taylor series are. The truncate Taylor series restricted basically to the function where f belongs to C1 and f belongs to C2. So this is truncate Taylor series for first order. So fx around x naught can be written as fx naught plus gradient of fx bar into x minus x naught, where x bar is a point on the line segment joining x and x naught, and x bar depends on f, x and x naught. It depends on these three. Now this idea can be extended to second order truncate Taylor series. So we will need this truncate Taylor series when we approximated function f at differential points. Now we will look at some important thing about proof of theorem. So in this course we will come across situation where we have to show that A is true, B is true. For example, if P is even number and P square will also be even number. So this is one way of implication. Now that can be proved by assuming A is true and then one proof that B is also true. So there is another way which is called proof of contradiction, where we assume that B is not true and then shows that A is also not true. So we will use either of these way to prove the implication. Now when it comes to two-way implication, where A implies B or B implies A, so which means A is true if and only if B is true. So one can think of it as a B is a necessary and sufficient condition for A. Now important point to be noted here is that we must prove that A implies B and B implies A. So a common example for this is that if P is a prime number, then 1 and P are the only factor. In this way one can also say that 1 and P are factor of P, then P is a prime number. So we can write it as P is a prime number if and only if 1 and P are the only factor of P. So this is two-way implication. So while proving it, we have to make sure that we prove A implies B and B implies A. So here is another interesting concept that will be used sometime in this course, that is called proof of mathematical induction. So this proof is based on induction principle. So let n be a set of natural number and m is subset of n. Now if suppose the following property holds that m1 is in m, that means 1 is in m, the set m, and if n is in m, then n plus 1 is also in n, then two sets are equal, m is equals to n. So we can conclude that by induction principle this holds m is equals to n. So here is an example. So let us define a sequence S. Sn to be some first n integer sum, where n is 1, 2, 3 and onward. Now you just must have seen result earlier that the sum of n positive integer, the first n positive integer into n plus 1 by 2, where n goes from 1 to 3 and onward. Now we want to prove this by the principle of mathematical induction. So let m denotes the set of natural number for which this claim is true. Now if n is equals to 1, s1 is equals to 1, that is nothing but 1 into 2 by 2. Therefore it belongs to m. So first property is satisfied. Now assume that n is in m and consider that n plus 1, then Sn is Sn plus n plus 1, and which can be written as n plus 1 into n plus 2 by 2. So this satisfies this property that if n is in m, then n plus 1 is also in m. So therefore from the induction principle, this property is proved that m is equals to n. Hence the claim is proved. So this is the way to prove the claim using mathematical induction. So we will need somewhere during this course. So that's all for today's lecture. Thank you.